with that, let's get the presentation started. Thanks again for coming to us. All right, so just a little bit of background on the two programs. They both come out of Plan NYC, which is the planning document for the Greener Greater New York. There's three main initiatives or areas of focus in this: air quality, energy, and climate change. Clean Heat is really an air quality program, whereas Local Law 87 and the other local laws focused on building efficiency are energy initiatives with a secondary focus on climate change. So why were these local laws enacted, and why are we talking about existing buildings? Well, as you can see on this chart, 79% of New York City's greenhouse gas emissions come from the electricities and fuels used by existing buildings. Also, 85% of the buildings that will end up participating in Local Law 87 by 2030 already existed in 2005. So what this means is that one of the biggest impacts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve air quality and reduce energy costs in New York City, we need to reduce energy use in existing buildings. Now, as for Clean Heat, the New York City Community Air Survey in 2008 discovered that number 6 and number 4 heavy heating oils, by eliminating them, is one of the highest impact strategies we can undertake to improve New York City's air quality. Now, to put this in a little bit of perspective, the soot pollution, or the PM 2.5 emissions from just the 1% of buildings in New York City that still burn heavy fuel oils is equivalent to all the car and truck traffic emissions in the city. So really, this is public health and well-being that's at risk when we burn heavy fuel oils. So now we're going to get into a little bit more specifics about what Local Law 87 and the Clean Heat laws are. Local Law 87 is part of a package of 4 laws known as the Greener Greater Buildings Plan, which were enacted in December 2009 to improve the energy and water efficiency in New York City's largest buildings. In order of compliance timeline, these laws include Local Law 85, New York City Energy Conservation Code, for all new projects breaking ground starting in 2010. Local Law 84, the benchmarking law, which requires buildings to annually report their energy use. This started in 2011. Local Law 87, the Energy Audits and Retro-commissioning law, which we'll be talking about today. First compliance year is this year, 2013. And finally, Local Law 88, which is about lighting upgrades and sub-metering, which requires compliance by 2025. So what exactly are the Energy Audit and Retro-commissioning? An energy audit is a systematic analysis of a building's energy equipment and its systems, envelope, and operation, which identifies cost-effective opportunities to save energy. Local Law 87 requires the energy audit, but does not require property owners to follow the recommendations in that audit. The energy audit is going to include interviews with operating personnel, review of utility bills and other operating data, and detailed analysis of energy consumption for all base building systems. Retro-commissioning, on the other hand, is the testing and tune-up of existing building systems to confirm that they're operating as they should be and in the most efficient manner possible. The retro-commissioning will identify maintenance, calibration, and operations errors that are easily corrected and typically add up to significant energy savings, as well as improve equipment reliability. Local Law 87 requires the retro-commissioning as well as fixing any deficiencies found in the retro-commissioning. In order to meet the requirements of Local Law 87, you have to file an energy efficiency report that includes both the energy audit and the retro-commissioning report. This slide just shows a few technical assistance resources and financial incentive program resources. We're going to get into these in more detail later on in the presentation, but just so that you can see some of the online resources really that are available to you to comply with Local Law 87. Great. So we've talked a little bit about the health impacts of heavy fuel oils. So To respond to this and to balance those health concerns with cost minimization for the buildings that are burning these heavy fuel oils, DEP is phasing out heavy oils in 2 stages. The first stage started last year in July and is focused on number 6. So DEP no longer approves certificates of operation for number 6 systems. That means that no new systems burning number 6 can be permitted at all. In addition, these permits cannot be renewed for existing 6 systems. So over the next 3 years, as these permits come up for renewal, these buildings will have to move to a different fuel. They can no longer burn 6. Now, phase 2 really focuses in on number 4. Number 4 will be completely eliminated by 2030. The permits will not be renewed. But another thing to note here is that it's 2030 or whenever a boiler or burner needs to be replaced. So if you have a 6 building now and you convert to 4 this year, and next year you have to change your burner out for some reason, it means that you're going to have to do the whole conversion process over again. So it really makes sense to skip the intermediate step of 4 and go right to the cleanest fuel available to you. So to help buildings with this process, the Mayor's Office set up the Clean Heat program. We provide technical assistance directly to buildings. We work one-on-one with you to understand, how the system conversion process works and help you connect you to resources. We liaise with the utilities and different industry leaders to make this process as smooth as possible. We also help buildings connect with financial assistance that's available to them through Clean Heat, something we'll be going into more depth later. We also have a website, nyc.gov/cleanheat, where you can learn about the health impacts, the more details on the conversion process, the financial partners, lots of different types of information. We also have a great account management team that, again, will work one-on-one with your building to help you through the process. Feel free to get started with us by emailing info@nyc.gov. You can also simply call 311 and ask for NYC Clean Heat, and they'll connect you to us. So now that we've gotten a little introduction to both of these programs, we want to talk to you about why you'd want to do these together and in conjunction. And really, this is really just a benefit to you, both in terms of cost, really about convenience, and definitely about the environmental impact of your building. So first of all, help you run a more efficient system. And retro-commissioning audits will show you the hotspots of energy use in your building and how to eliminate them. Financials are also really important, and financing and incentives are available through both programs now, but they are limited, so it's important to take advantage of them as soon as you can. It also makes sense if you have to comply to local law 87 and Clean Heat at the same time. It makes sense to do this together to eliminate doubled efforts and wasted resources with overlapping projects that you probably will have to do. And finally, local law 87 and Clean Heat together will improve the environmental performance of your building tremendously. And really what this is about the public health and environmental health of New York City. So now we'll talk a little bit more about the actual planning and construction for both of these programs.
All right, so the first thing I'm sure everyone wants to know is how do you find out if your building has to comply with these laws? As Laura mentioned, the overlap, there is 65% of the Clean Heat buildings are also going to have to comply with local law 87. So there's a good chance that if you're converting your fuel oil, you're going to also have to do your energy audit and retro-commissioning for compliance with local law 87. That said, the details about what buildings have to comply are slightly different for the 2 laws. I'll just go over them quickly. If your building is over 50,000 square feet, or you have 2 or more buildings either on the same lot or held in condo ownership that together are more than 100,000 square feet, you have to comply with local law 87. The square footage for this law is based on the gross square footage using Department of Finance square footage as a general rule of thumb. And a list of buildings covered by the laws is available on the Mayor's Office website at nyc.gov/LL87. Clean Heat, on the other hand, applies to single buildings on a lot over 40,000 square feet, whose heating systems use the heavy oil, number 4 or number 6, as the primary fuel source, and the heating system is permitted by DEP. So if you're questioning whether or not you have to comply with Clean Heat put together this Spot the SIP map, which is a very handy resource, especially good for owners and managers wondering whether or not their buildings must comply, but also for contractors who are possibly looking for buildings that have to comply. But essentially, every building on this map every building that has to comply with Clean Heat is represented by a dot on this map. If you are still needing to switch your heating oil, then you're going to be a red or an orange dot. And the nice feature on this map is that once you convert, you'll still be on the map, but you'll show up as green or blue. So you can really nicely track the process. Next, you're going to want to find out when you have to comply. There's a little note on the bottom of this chart showing that if you need to convert off number 6 heating oil, you're going to have to do so no later than July of 2015. Local Law 87, on the other hand, is on a rolling cycle. Every 10 years, your building will have to comply with Local Law 87, and the compliance year is based on the last digit of the building's tax block number. That last digit of the block number corresponds with your reporting year. So, for instance, if your block number ends in a 6, your first reporting year is 2016, and then subsequently 2026, 2036, and so on. You do have the option for early compliance under Local Law 87, which means that no matter what your reporting year is, you can choose to file in 2013. There are a couple of advantages. I'll name a few of the big ones. The first is that there are currently generous tax and utility incentives that may not exist in the future years, and you really do want to try to take advantage of those as soon as possible. Second, also financially related, the sooner you implement your energy efficiencies, the longer you will, of course, benefit from them. And finally, noting that all heating oil conversions have to happen off of number 6 by July 2015, if you're in a later compliance year, there's a huge incentive to comply early and do these two things together. One thing to note, though, is that we'll get into more of the scheduling of the Local Law 87 initiatives later, but if you are deciding to comply early in 2013, you really want to start this process now. So the first step in participating and complying with Local Law 87 is to select your Greener Greater Buildings Plan Administrator. This is someone who you assign to manage the process towards compliance, and it should be someone who has a strong understanding of the building operations. This will help you have get maximum value out of the energy audit and retro-commissioning. The second step is deciding whether or not to do your energy audit at the same time as retro-commissioning. There are some advantages to either combining, but also advantages to doing them separately. Just to go over the advantages of combining them quickly, the staff in your building will spend less time collecting information required for the retro-commissioning. Consultants may offer discounts for doing the two together, and doing them together helps ensure that the capital projects are actually necessary. So, for instance, equipment that an audit may flag as underperforming and a target for replacement could see its life extended through retro-commissioning. On the other hand, it's helpful to benchmark the performance of the building as part of the audit before you do any retro-commissioning to quantify the energy savings of all the recommendations. Step 3 is to search for and select a qualified retro-commissioning agent and begin the process of the retro-commissioning. So retro-commissioning covers 28 measures. They're outlined in the letter of the law, and they ensure that your heating, cooling, lighting, and water systems are all operating in line with current facility requirements, and that all of these systems are tuned for optimal efficiencies. As I mentioned earlier, you are required to correct any deficiencies or non-compliant issues prior to submitting your energy efficiency report at the end of your compliance year, and you should definitely build in time to do that. Most of these deficiencies should be low or no-cost repairs. That is the intention of the law, so hopefully that will be the case for your building. When you're scheduling this, note that the timing depends a lot on the season. If you have both heating and cooling equipment in your building, you're going to need to build in time to do the retro-commissioning in a heating and a cooling season. So it could take up to a year to perform the entire retro-commissioning process. The retro-commissioning agent, the qualifications are spelled out in detail in the law. I'm not going to go into them here because we don't have enough time for that. But a few takeaways is that the agent must not be on the building staff, and the agent either has to be a licensed architect or engineer or registered with Department of Buildings, as well as hold some certifications that make them qualified to do the retro-commissioning. One thing I also want to mention is that finding a capable retro-commissioning agent in 2013 could be challenging because very few firms have experience doing this work now. So we recommend that you take a look at NYSERDA's Flex Tech list of approved vendors. They've been vetted, and also take a look at people who have experience doing audits in buildings similar as yours, and they should be able to do a good retro-commissioning report. On the energy audit side, again, you want to select, obviously, a qualified energy auditor and begin that process as soon as possible, especially for early compliance. The energy audit itself is going to have to be at least as stringent as ASHRAE Level 2, which basically means that you're going to interview operating personnel, review utility bills and other operating data, and get a detailed analysis of energy consumption for the base building systems. Your contract should also include a requirement that the report provide information on available incentives for each energy conservation recommended. In terms of thinking about your energy audit and retro-commissioning together, again, think about the seasonality of when you're testing the equipment, and also know that the energy audit and retro-commissioning can be completed up to 4 years prior to when the building submits its energy efficiency report. The auditor requirements are pretty similar to the retro-commissioning requirements, except that the certifications are slightly different. So take a look at the law and see what those certifications are. But again, your auditor needs to either be a licensed architect or engineer or registered with Department of Buildings. And the final step in participating with Local Law 87 is to submit your energy efficiency report and pay the filing fee by the end of your reporting year. Those forms and the filing fee are not yet disclosed by Department of Buildings, unfortunately, but we've been told that within the next month or two they should be available for review. Obviously, the filing fee will be less expensive than the fees for not complying. So if you don't comply, DOB is enforcing this. You will be fined $3,000 for the first year and $5,000 for each subsequent year if you do not submit your energy efficiency report. If you do submit it and you comply with the law, you want to make sure that you maintain your records for at least 11 years from the required submission date, because Department of Buildings will be auditing your audit randomly. So you want to make sure that you have all of the records of who did the audit, who did the retro-commissioning, and the results of those two exercises on site at all times.
Great. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how you can participate with clean heat, and you're going to see that there's actually a lot of opportunities to overlap with the work that you're going to be doing for Local Law 87. So first of all, before you do anything, just assess your current system. And definitely, as you can probably guess, your Greener Greater Buildings Plan team should be able to help you do this when you're conducting your audit. So things that you're going to want to look at with your engineer, contractor, auditor is the life, the age of your system, your boiler and your burner, the current condition that both of those things are in. Also interesting or good to note is that many burners on the marketplace now burn both oil and gas, so that's something you're going to want to look at. Also, if you're thinking about an oil-to-oil conversion, you're going to have to consider the condition of your tank and the location of your tank in the boiler room. If you're thinking about gas, you're going to have to consider how your chimneys are lined. So some initial thoughts to kind of have with your team. The next step is to select your target fuel. It's important to know that clean heat is a fuel neutral program. We'll help you move on to anything pretty much unless it's 4 or 6. So some of the most common fuels that we work with are ultra-low sulfur number 2, fuel oil. Oftentimes this is blended with biodiesel, so to different grades. So B5, B20s indicate the percentage levels of biodiesel. So B5 is a 5% blend, B20 is a 20% blend, and so on. Natural gas certainly is another fuel that we see a lot. Steam is available to some buildings in New York that need to comply with clean heat. And of course, we'll help you assess other alternatives, such as geothermal or cogeneration. So we don't have time now to go through every single nitty-gritty step of the conversion process and the construction and all that. But here's just some, top-level things that you'll have to do when converting to the two most common fuels, natural gas and number 2. So to start with natural gas, the first thing that you're going to have to know and consider is that the planning and construction period will take 6 to 9 months, even upwards of a year. So you have to think about that in terms of your own internal resources, as well as just, the construction and planning period. So the first step that we recommend is to contact Clean Heat. We are working very closely with the gas utilities, and we'll be able to help you give some initial understanding of the gas availability in your area. We'll also help you connect with all the resources that are available to you, and answer any of the technical questions that you might have. Second, you want to determine your conversion costs. So again, something that your local LL87 auditor might be able to help you with. Come in, assess your system, see what would need to be swapped out or changed. They also will help you figure out what your operating savings and payback period will be. And finally, once you have all of this put together, you'll submit an application package to your utility, which will be National Grid or Con Edison, depending on where you're located in the city. Now, when you're thinking about oil-to-oil conversions, the big advantage here is that the planning and construction period is much shorter. We're talking 4 to 6 weeks start to finish, and a lot of times construction can happen in as little as 1 day, which means that you can do it even during the heating season if you want, but certainly right after. So the steps are somewhat similar. First, you again want to contact Clean Heat, so to make sure that you are as informed and as connected to all the resources as you can be. Second, you want to determine your conversion costs. So again, bringing a qualified professional or your local LL87 auditor out to take a look at your system. You also want to think about who's going to be supplying your oil. Contact your current supplier and see if they carry if they carry biodiesel blends, get their rates. Also, like, oil is a very competitive market, so you might want to shop around a little bit. You may get different prices from different suppliers. Also, definitely consider biodiesel. You can take advantage of the tax credit. It burns very cleanly. And then the last thing you want to do is understand your operating costs. So when you convert to a cleaner, lighter fuel oil, you'll see improvements in your boiler maintenance. You're going to see, you may be able to take advantage of tax credits, again, through the biodiesel, and energy efficiency measures that you implement that affect your thermal load is definitely going to help you burn less oil and save you money. If you're looking for biodiesel suppliers, if that's something you're interested in, this link on the bottom of the page here, bioheatonline.com, has a great resource for you to find local dealers that you could work with. And all projects, regardless of the fuel that they're going to, should definitely consider energy efficiency measures. So this is the type of stuff that will be in your local LL87 audit report. It's something that your retro-commissioning agents may be able to carry out. And it will definitely help you save money when you think about your heating fuels. Also, all the projects are going to have to solicit and select contractors. There aren't requirements in Clean Heat for who can do this. It's just whoever you feel comfortable with or whoever you've worked with in the past. You're also going to have to consider permitting, DEP and DOB for all of these conversions, DEC if you're doing an oil-to-oil conversion because they handle the tanks. And then lastly, you'll have to coordinate the construction.
Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the financial resources that are currently in place to help with compliance. We understand that although you should see operating and maintenance savings by implementing local law 87 initiatives, as well as switching out your oil, you do need help sometimes funding the initial compliance. So this slide just gives an overview of what we'll be going over in a little bit more detail later in the slide, but we recommend that you go directly to Con Edison and NYC's websites for the incentives based on local law 87, and then visit Clean Heat's website for incentives for the local law 43 or the Clean Heat program. This slide goes into some greater detail about the commercial, institutional, industrial, and data center incentive programs available from Con Edison and NYC for local law 87. Again, I'm not going to go into detail about this, but this slideshow will be available on Clean Heat's website if you want to refer back to it for more detail. Some things to note as an overarching comment is that you must pay the system's benefit charge in order to qualify for all or any of these incentive programs. The NYC Flex Tech program, the funds are currently available through the end of 2015, so another reason for complying early. These incentives are not going to be available forever. And then on the Con Edison side, you must be a Con Edison customer to apply for any Con Edison incentives. And also note that Con Edison requires an ASHRAE Level 3 audit, which is a little bit more stringent than what's required by the law. On the multifamily side, again, refer back to this presentation if you'd like to really take note of all of the details on this slide about the available incentive programs. But one takeaway and just note is that to qualify for NYC's programs, at least 50% of the building's heated space must be residential. And finally, this chart gives another way of looking at the available incentives for local law 87. One thing to see on this slide, though, is that there is additional information on the type of incentive available and how much money is available. So this is a good way to just overarching see which program might be best for your building. If you have specific questions about the local 87 incentives, the contacts listed on this slide from NYC and Con Edison will be able to help you find the exact right program for your building. So we definitely recommend reaching out to them directly.
Great. So, for local 87, we're really talking about incentives based on different types of protocol for energy efficiency. With Clean Heat, we're talking about financing. So in June of last year, Mayor Bloomberg announced more than $100 million in financing for buildings participating in Clean Heat to help with conversion costs. Much of this is run by the New York City Energy Efficiency Corporation. We call them NYC for short. So this financing comes in three basic categories. The first is direct lending. So NYC both originates loans as well as provides credit enhancement to commercial lenders. NYC also credit enhances mortgage lenders for mortgage-based products. And finally, leasing is something else that some of our partners provide, and this is really for equipment replacements for buildings that, for whatever reason, do not want to take out a loan and do not want to look at their mortgage as a resource for financing. We work with a number of different financial partners to provide different types of financing to different types of buildings. So the great thing is we have a lot of different partners, and your building will be able to find something that suits your specific needs amongst all of them. If you go to our website here, right under the picture of Mayor Bloomberg, you'll be able to read a little bit more about what each of these platforms offers. Definitely feel free to reach out to a Clean Heat account manager, and they'll help you navigate this as well. But something that's interesting to note is that some of these financial platforms do also require energy efficiency upgrades, and a lot of the information that they're going to ask you for, you're going to get in your local Audit 7 audit report. So this is a great way to overlap this and be able to tap into both financing and incentives.
All right, and finally, we'll just leave you with a few takeaways to maximize benefit of doing both of these programs together. So on the energy audit side, our biggest recommendation is to not only do it to comply with the law, but use it as a way to develop an action plan for future upgrades. we do recommend that you implement all low and no-cost energy conservation measures as soon as possible, but then use that energy audit as a capital planning tool for the next fiscal year or upcoming fiscal years. On the retro-commissioning side, since you have to fix any deficiencies that are not in compliance, the most important step to effective retro-commissioning is hiring a good contractor to repair the report. So as I said, take a look at firms that have good track records with energy auditing and the NYC.gov approved flex tech vendors, and that's a good place to start with finding a good contractor to do this work. Also on the retro-commissioning side, make sure that your building superintendent or operator is involved in the retro-commissioning process so that they're aware of any changes that are being made. Finally, as we've been reiterating this entire presentation, you're going to want to make sure that you consider compliance for Local Law 87 with the clean heat. Combine the switch, and it's definitely going to be beneficial. Just to summarize some of the key points, there are going to be overlaps in the energy audit evaluation and what you need to apply for the clean heat financial incentives, as well as assess what switch you want to make on the clean heat side. Also, you may see value in switching your heating oil sooner rather than later, as opposed to fixing deficiencies highlighted in the retro-commissioning report. If you see in your energy audit that there's a 5 or 10 year payback to switch out that heating oil or your boiler, you might want to do that before you go ahead and fix the deficiencies that are required for your retro-commissioning. And then finally, we recommend in general to just make sure that if you can, invest in staff training so that the people who are ultimately going to be continuously operating and maintaining your buildings are aware of the changes you made and why you made them, and they're on board so that you actually continue to see benefits after your compliance year. Some of the programs that are available are listed on the right-hand side of the slide, and take a look at, there's funding available to send your building operators to these programs.
Great, and just some takeaways from the clean heat side. By burning a cleaner fuel, you're going to net a number of different system benefits, and one of the main ones is that you're going to lower the soot buildup in your system. It's going to run more efficiently. You're going to reduce your maintenance costs. If you have questions about this or you want to learn more about it, the clean heat account managers can walk you through the types of efficiencies that you would get by switching off of a heavy fuel oil. Again, there's cost benefits both to this and the Local 87 changes that you're going to make to your building, just reducing your energy. There's also the biodiesel tax incentives that you can tap into, and the cost of natural gas is also very competitive right now. And this is also really about convenience. I mean, do both of these programs together, and you don't have to do them both separately because you're going to have to comply to both, or many buildings are going to have to comply to both of them. So, you know, just to kill the two birds with one stone, get it done, get your building optimized for its energy usage, and you're going to see benefits across the system. Also, just in terms of clean heat, skipping for it will be more convenient for you in the long run if you're burning sticks right now, because once you do that, you don't have to worry about it ever again, and you're running a cleaner system. So, you know, by complying early to Local 87, by doing clean heat, you can net these benefits right away. So we've covered a lot of information today. Thanks to everyone for sticking with it. There's definitely more opportunities to learn both about Local 87 and clean heat. Listed here are some upcoming events. There's one next week, another presentation for Local 87. The RICP information is there. Also, please sign up for the mailing list if you're interested in participating in events in the future. The website is also on the screen. Clean Heat is also going to be conducting another webinar on the financing platforms and how you can finance your clean heat conversion. That's coming up in early March. The RSVP information is there. We definitely encourage everyone to participate. And also feel free to sign up for our mailing list by emailing info@nyc.gov. So with that, we're going to look into the questions that have been logged in on the Q&A box on live meeting. We'll answer those, and then we'll open up the line for anyone else who has questions. All right, so the first question here is, can you get a copy of the slides? Absolutely. Just email info@nyc.gov, and we'd be happy to email them to you. Also, a video of this presentation will be on the Clean Heat website, so you can review it then. So you have two options there. All right, so the next question is, if I want to do early compliance for local Law 87 and have signed contracts to convert to number 2 or natural gas and started the work, but won't complete it by the end of 2013, can I still submit my EER? Does your answer change if my compliance year is 2013?
For local law 87, you just have to complete the energy audit and the retro-commissioning exercise and then implement any of the recommendations listed in the retro-commissioning report. So even if you haven't finished switching out your oil to number 2 or natural gas, you can still submit your EER at the end of 2013 as long as you've complied with those two things.
Okay. Great question. All right, so the next question we have here is, if you are burning number 2 fuel oil, what is the next step required to convert to gas? Absolutely not. Number 2 fuel oil is extremely clean in terms of the air quality emissions that we were talking about, the PM 2.5. So again, Clean Heat is an air quality initiative, and we're very happy for people to be burning number 2 with or without biodiesel blends. So you can stay on it as long as you want. There's no plans to phase it out. Okay, so the next question is, how can a company register with DOB in order to perform local Law 87 compliance?
So DOB is currently finalizing the forms that companies will need to fill out in order to register. Those forms should be finalized within the next couple of months. I know it's a little bit frustrating since we're already in the first compliance year, but I trust that they're working as hard as they can to get these forms out ASAP. What I do know, or what I've been told, is that as long as the individual who's registering with the Department of Buildings has the certifications listed in the law, they will more than likely be approved for registration. So that's just, I guess, a rule for thumb moving forward. If you haven't already received any of those certifications, that would be the first step in the process. If you already have them, then you should be able to just fill out the form once it becomes available.
Great. We have another question here about starting retro-commissioning this year based on the law, but if you don't get deficiencies fixed until 2014, do you still have to do it again under the rule?
So if your building is due in 2013, or you're going for early compliance, but you don't fix the deficiencies until 2014, then you've technically not complied with the law or the rule. So if your building is due in 2013 and you don't think you're going to be able to complete the deficiencies until 2014, then you're going to want to file for an extension on or before October 1st of your filing year. If you're going for early compliance in 2013 but don't get the deficiencies fixed until 2014, you've missed your opportunity for early compliance, and unless you're due in the next 4 years, you won't be able to use the energy audit and retro-commissioning report that you worked on for early compliance. So for the early compliance, you want to be very sure that you will finish by the end of 2014 so that that work doesn't go to waste. But you do have an opportunity to get a time extension if your year is actually 2013.
Okay, great. We have another question here. How will local Law 87 compliance be enforced, and who will review the energy efficiency reports?
So Department of Buildings is responsible for enforcing local Law 87, and they will be the ones reviewing the energy efficiency reports.
Okay. So another question here, if a single person has a PE, CEM, CVCP license and certifications, can that person complete the whole local Law 87 project?
Yes.
Great. another clarification that was brought up by one of our clean heat account managers, Ken Camilleri, and it's a good point to remember, is that if your building is burning 6 and your permit is expiring, you need to do something about that before the expiration date. If you're in the process of your local LL87 compliance, you don't get a waiver on your DEP expiration date just because you're in the process of local LL87. So you'll need to deal with your heating system first. So again, this is kind of another thing about early compliance, taking a look at your system early and making sure that you don't have this kind of conflict that comes up. If you're not sure what your renewal date is, we have access to all that information, so feel free to give us a call at Clean Heat and we can help you figure out what your dates are looking like. All right, so I think that's the last of the questions that we got online, so I'm going to unmute everyone's line and you can just ask us questions the old-fashioned way.